Awesome. So now we have all three beautiful boys back together again, yet again.
Don't ever call me a beautiful boy.
Okay, three sexy
I
boys.
Ah, that's more like it.
that's probably worse. That's probably worse.
And, well, I'll get us right into this, shall we? We are the Commuters podcast, I guess. And today, Sky brought a suggestion of his very own. Would you like to say what the suggestion is, Sky? Even though if somebody's watching this, they probably know.
Yeah, no, my suggestion was the very vaunted, that's right, an anime film, just for you. No, it's Jurassic Park. I recommended Jurassic Park. Because I like Jurassic Park. The first one, mind you. Not like any of the sequels, not Jurassic World. The first one. Also, I just want to go on a quick tangent to say I apparently know nothing about the islands because, a while back, me and Basil got on a tangent about the islands, and I was vehemently saying that there were like 4 islands and they visit all of them on this old conversation. And I'm wrong. They don't do that in any of the movies. They only visit like 2 islands. That's it. That's my piece.
So I didn't want to like start off with that because we would get to that naturally. I like to say I'm right, as we all know. So we would have gotten there eventually, but I think that was a great suggestion. I hadn't seen the first Jurassic Park. I hadn't like sat down and watched it beginning to end in a long time. So I was kind of like pretty excited to jump back into a magical world of dinosaurs. How about you, Will?
Confession time. I,
Uh
before this recommendation, had never seen the film at all.
What?
Wow.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah.
That's so that's actually kind of awesome.
Oh
So you got
man.
to experience it for the first time.
Yep.
Okay. Before we start our discussion, I just need to ask, how's it feel when that moment washes over you as you see dinosaurs and the music kicks in? What do you think of that moment? I needed to ask it because it's like one of the most iconic moments in the whole film by far.
Yeah, that was
Uh,
a great shot with the music.
yeah. Uh, I yeah.
I think that this is going to be a little more interesting than I thought too. That's so cool. I love it when we have like a pretty famous movie to talk about that one of us hasn't seen. Like when we did Shawshank and like I'd never seen Shawshank, so it makes things more interesting,
Yeah.
give us more perspective. Um, yeah, that's really cool. I so Full disclosure, I watched Jurassic Park and then I watched Jurassic World and then I also watched a bunch of bonus features for Jurassic Park. So I'm pretty immersed right now in the Jurassic averse, if you will. Um, that I wanted to bring some of that to this discussion. And Sky, since you recommended it, where do you want to kick off with like general thoughts on the movie and what it means to you in the story and whatnot?
Yeah, sure. One of the biggest reasons that I wanted to rewatch it is mostly because it's that kind of series that like I never remember any movie except the first one. Uh, because I don't really care for any of the other ones. I didn't care for uh Lost World or whatever. As much as I love Jeff Goldblum, didn't care for it. Didn't care for the third film. I don't even need to talk about my opinion on World because yeah, but it's always been like there's something really mystifying and something very primal in the joy of seeing dinosaurs. Like dinosaurs are cool, dude. They've always been cool. And the movie, the first like half of the film really encapsulates that kind of awe and mystique to like seeing a dinosaur like alive and among us, in like the modern day. And that's one of the biggest reasons like I love this film. I know I'm like going really deep real fast, but I think a big portion of why this film is so good is because it's filled with so much wonder on top of how terrifying it gets later, considering what ends up happening to a lot of our characters. That combined with the score, you just get something special in this first film.
Oh yeah.
It's something special.
Yeah, for sure. I have like a very long history with these movies. I mean, growing up, I think one of them we might have watched Jurassic Park and Pirates of the Caribbean. I don't know why these two movies, but growing up, I think we watched those more than any other movies. Um, Something about pirates and dinosaurs just appealed to my family, I guess. And it really hits me, and I have a lot of nostalgia for it. And watching it again, especially now, like I have a slightly nicer TV now uh, that I had last couple years, and just watching it, and it's a little bit bigger, and the music's just blaring, and there's this sense of like awe, and we'll get into some of the themes later, but the like you said, the wonder of it, but also the terrible, like the horror of it is very much reminiscent of just nature itself, which I find really cool. Like you see these things where you're like, oh, this is amazing, but yeah, by the way, it can kill you. And I think that's a great juxtaposition. And when we get into the characters, we can talk a little bit more about how they all play off each other, which is just great. But I think like Jurassic Park is pinnacle Steven Spielberg, and we really don't get movies like this anymore. I was just thinking about it, and when I was rewatching Jurassic World to compare the two, there's just this sense of wonder and like respect that's in the first movie that just I you don't get from the later movies, and you don't really get from any movie, in my opinion. Like that shot where it's just, hey, here's some dinosaurs, and here's a score that's gonna make you cry. Like that's all there is, but it works, and it works exceptionally well. Yeah, I love this film, and I pretty much just have good things to say about it. Well, yeah, I want to know, Will, like kind of just like as somebody who watched this for the first time, I know it's a little older. There's some effects that haven't aged well. I think it aged pretty well, but there's still some CGI that you can tell is CGI. But if what did you think? Like kind of just watching this for the first time.
Well, actually, the effects were the big thing for me personally. Was like, there's obviously some like things in a lot of the shots where you're like, okay, that's obviously not real, but they really brought the dinosaurs to life. Is how I would say it. Like, even if they're not like, even if you can tell they're CGI sometimes. Like the way they move and like sound and everything else, like it all just comes together really well for me.
Yeah, the audio design. I mean, my goodness, talk about good audio design. Iconic audio design.
I really liked the part where they first showed like a full body shot of that one dinosaur.
Which one?
Like the leaf eating one, the one with the really long neck.
Brachiosaur. Are you talking about the one with the long neck?
Yeah.
Yeah, Brachiosaur.
Yeah, I really like that shot. And
Oh, yeah.
that moment.
I I bet you've seen the memes. Like the son of a bitch, he did it. Like that meme.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
there's so many memes from this movie,
Oh yeah, the see nobody cares.
or like the clever girl.
Oh,
There's
so good.
what an iconic film. Yeah. Well, the way they made each dinosaur have like a unique sound, and not like this is something I was thinking about while I was watching Jurassic World. In Jurassic World, the dinosaurs all just like they still sound like the Jurassic Park dinosaurs, but like it's like they muted them. Like they sound less distinct. Like the Tyrannosaurus and the Raptors still sound like the ones from this movie, just less like raw. I don't know a better word to say it. Like it feels like they're just kind of muddled. Whereas I was like watching this and I'm like the Tyrannosaurus, the Velociraptors, even like the Brachiosaurs, they all have like a specific sound that is easily identifiable with them, and I think it's great.
Yeah.
And it helps to establish a kind of presence. So when you can introduce the dinosaur with that sound, like I love the Velociraptor's sounds, like this kind of like metal scraping sound, because it's like nothing you really ever heard an animal sound like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. Like the raptor sound is one of those iconic sounds. The moment you hear it, you're like, "That's a fucking velociraptor." I heard that. Like it's something about all. I think the whole thing about like how they have a weight to them, like to the way they sound, kind of carries with how they also kind of move and look. Despite the CGI, they kind of have this weight to them that like
Yeah.
makes them more believable. Whereas like in World, I'm like, yeah, they're CGI dinosaurs. Like it's weird to say that. Like I feel like they put a lot of care into making them feel as though they're part of the world, despite clearly not physically being part of the world. because unfortunately, CGI at that time, it does not usually age very well. But
No.
You know what? For the record, uh, the only shot to me that looks a little bit rough, the only parts where I thought the CGI looked rough, and maybe we can talk about the effects now because I've got some backstory that I've researched. But
okay,
the only effects to me that looked rough were the stuff in broad daylight. So in the beginning with the Brachiosaur, it looks a little bit rough, and then at the end, in the like the whatever welcome center. But in the rain at night, or even in the kitchen, the time we saw that CGI, I thought the T-Rex in the rain at night looked fantastic. Like the CGI to the point where it holds up next to CGI I've seen today, and is some cases Justice League better than CGI that we see today, which is kind of insane.
Well, I feel like they might have maybe in a way felt like they had to try harder back then than they did now.
And back to the backstory I want to provide. Before they went with CGI, they were actually going to do all of those wide shots with stop motion. Pretty interesting.
Oh.
And they actually have a bunch of stop motion reels. You could probably find them on YouTube actually, of these like test reels they were doing of like the T-Rex and the Raptors in stop motion. And you can see it and you can compare it to the CGI and you can say like, oh, well, what you think looks better. But I honestly think the CGI looks better because the stop motion looks like, King Kong. It looked really dated. Even though the models are really good, it didn't look like it was going to work. And I think Spielberg realized this, and they essentially stumbled on the CGI aspect almost by accident because ILM, Industrial Light and Music, one of Lucas's production companies, the people who do all the special effects for Star Wars and stuff, they were like using the CGI to do like previses. Like they were like, oh well, maybe we can do this, and then we'll plan it out with the stop motion. And then they're like, well, you know what? I think one of the CGI guys said, I think we could do the dinosaur in the computer. And then he made a test of the Gallimimuses running. And Spielberg was like, wow, this is it. This is the future. And
Yeah.
I like the idea because they realize that it's a tool and used completely with all the physical stuff works together so well. And I think we've seen examples of this since then. Like, I think Mad Max Fury Road is a good example. I think Blade Runner 2049. There's other examples where they use a ton of physical stuff and they blend it with CGI and special effects, and it's seamless. And I think so many movies took the wrong message from Jurassic Park and were like, oh, just more fake CGI. It'll make it better. But anyways, that's kind of my tangent on CGI and that stuff.
No, I think it's an important discussion to have because like CGI is one of those things that like it exists very strongly now in like where we are. It's a big part of the film world, and it's still like it can be misused like left and right. Like I'm gonna be honest, it's still like one of those things that like even when we see like a high budget like Marvel movie, I'm like that CGI looks a little rough here. I don't believe it sometimes, and like that's something that kind of speaks to like the medium as a whole. But yet, like you said, Jurassic Park like uses it in these really really smart ways. There's this thing where it is just straight up easier to disguise CGI in the dark because a lot of the imperfections are kind of hidden behind like the scene. And on top of that, they're using rain, they're using like the light and reflections to kind of in that particular scene you're talking about with the Tyrannosaurus, it really kind of they get the opportunity to just kind of mold it, if that makes sense, as opposed to trying to light it perfectly in the day,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it looks great. I mean, that scene is probably, it's also terrifying, that whole sequence.
Yeah, do we want to segue into that scene? Because I think that's, in my opinion, that's the pinnacle scene of this film, is the Tyrannosaurus scene, because it's the first time that dinosaurs interact with the humans in an offensive manner, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like the first time we see it right there in our face, and what's like a masterfully done scene. Like the drawing out of tension, using the rain, using the ripples in the cups, the iconic ripple in the cups with the steps, like mixing it with thunder, so you're like, oh well, maybe it's thunder. Like there's all these little touches that come together to that. You obviously have the goat and then a little bit of like you see him testing the wires, and like anytime they could use a physical thing for the T-Rex, they did, and I loved that. Like they built almost a full-size T-Rex for this, which is just awesome. But yeah, this whole build up, and then having the kids in the car with the one guy, and just like it's such a masterclass in atmosphere and tension. It's really just it's Spielberg firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, the funny thing is like that scene in itself also kind of plays up that this movie is pretty scary actually for its like second half. At least for a lot of like when I was like younger, this movie like terrified me because it's like, you know, the idea of being killed by a dinosaur is actually like pretty horrifying, and it doesn't help that like the T-Rex, every time it's shown, it's very large, imposing, and they do a lot of like really good work with like selling how physically powerful it is. Like you mentioned, whenever they had the chance to use real things to kind of represent it, they do, and it's great. It's always awesome. And that also goes into the Raptors, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, because the Raptors also get a lot of their own like stalking scenes essentially, and I love those scenes so much because the tension is also really, it's there too. The thing is I feel like the whole film does a really good job of selling tension and the danger that you're in when you're around like these predators from another time, pretty much.
Yeah, no, for sure. And maybe one thing that just sorry, I was gonna segue, but then I lost my segue. And so, much like the guy who invented segways, I drove that right off a cliff. The characters, though, and what characters they got. So I think an important thing to do when you're making a movie of any kind is to have just, even if it's like you don't get to spend a lot of time with characters, if you can have distinct, perfectly understandable characters right from the get-go, great. A big issue with Jurassic World, in my opinion, is you have some great actors in it, but Chris Pratt just plays a Chris Pratt type. In Guardians of the Galaxy, Chris Pratt plays a very well-developed, in my opinion, character who you understand his wants and where he comes from, and he has personality. In Jurassic World, he just plays like generic action guy. The difference here is like these characters are all well thought out, they're all interesting, and they all play to their strengths. Like Jeff Goldblum is playing a Jeff Goldblum type in this, but he's like a rock star Jeff Goldblum type who's also super smart. And Sam Neill, I actually wouldn't know what you would call a Sam Neill type, but like he's the type of lead that you don't see nowadays in a movie like this. He's like a middle-aged guy who's just like, he's a paleontologist. And then Laura Dern is great in it as well. And you have John Hammond, and like the kids actually do surprisingly well.
Oh, the kids are great.
Yeah, which is something that Spielberg, I think, gets right in almost all of his movies that feature children, is having just good child actors and good implementation of said child actors. But the cast just it's spectacular, and it's used to great effect. Because it's one thing to have a good cast, it's another thing to use a good cast well.
Yeah.
Speaking of using characters well, when Sam Jackson appeared, I was like, oh, he's gonna die. It's just like, oh, he's dead.
Yeah, yeah.
He always dies in everything.
Yeah.
I mean, at this time, he was also the hey, we need a black actor character. Like, and whenever they were casting a black character in a movie in like the 90s or 80s, like it was Sam Jackson.
Oh yeah.
I loved him though in it. I mean, "Hold on to your butts" is an iconic line.
Oh yeah, and it was pretty funny to see his arm. Just,
it's pretty funny to see his arm.
Yeah, you can quote me on that.
Yeah, I'm gonna quote you on that. Also, obviously, we got a lot of big stars. Well, at least for this time, like we had a lot of notable ones. Like, I mean, Jeff Goldblum. I mentioned him earlier. God bless him and his weird sounds. Yeah, I love the cast. I mean, it says something when like Sam Neill's character, Grant, is just like he really comes off as a man of science, a man who appreciates the past and all that, but also, God, you can tell that he's just fed up, and that's something I kind of love about his character through most of the film. Is he's really fed up, but he's trying to do the right thing. Like, obviously, this especially relates to his kind of relationship with the two kids, and also, is Sattler his? I always forget. It's not. Yeah, Sattler.
Yeah, Sattler.
No, I was gonna say like their connection. They're not like a couple yet, right?
Yeah, they are.
Oh, they are. All right. I always forget if they're like currently just like like assist like
No,
scientific assistants. Okay.
no, they're a couple.
Okay, I'm
right
dumb.
from the beginning.
I for some odd reason that's one of those things that
Yeah.
like I always like blank on really hard. Other than that though, like it's kind of like cool to see how his character grows over the course of the film, because him and Sattler have like a very different dynamic with how they viewed the kids throughout the film, and they get kind of saddled with protecting them. I get it, saddled Sattler. But seeing him grow, it feels so genuine because of the life or death kind of situations that they're stuck in, and I think that's a big part. Is I don't feel like any character exists to be a character, if that makes sense.
No, exactly. No, that's exactly right. There's no caricatures. Like even John Hammond. John Hammond is like, oh, he's the rich guy who made the park, but he also has like a lot of like pathos to why he's doing what he's doing. Like he made the park because he wants to bring that wonder to the world, because he wants to amaze people. He's not somebody who was born into riches. There's a little touches that you can pick up on, and he's not even a like he's a main character, but he's not one of the main characters.
Yeah.
And he has to watch his dream die, and by the end of the movie he realized what he was doing wasn't right. Like it's a good idea, but it isn't going to work. It's not natural, and we can get into some of the themes, but like their journeys, each character has like a good journey. Like I mean, maybe not so much Jeff Goldblum. He's kind of just like, he gets to do something heroic, I guess, and like that's kind of
Yeah,
it.
but that's kind of in character
But-
for him, because he kind of comes off as a bit of a
Yeah.
scummy dude in the beginning.
Yeah, and we get to see Neil or Sam Neill, Dr. Grant. He comes, like his beginning thing is he's not really like, he doesn't like kids, and he's more involved with his work and not as good with people. And by the end, he's like, he's grown as a person and he can handle things. And there's just a lot of good development there, and it's compelling. The way they drive the story along, the way they group up the characters together. So you put the guy who doesn't like kids with the kids, and that makes good TV or movie. Obviously it's not TV, but doing that stuff I think makes it more compelling. You put what's his name? The dude with the guy with the velociraptors who hunts them.
Robert Muldoon, I think.
Muldoon. Yeah, I thought he was pretty great too.
Oh yeah.
And he had this sort of Moby Dick in what's the guy, Abraham? What's the Captain Abe?
Oh, Captain Ahab.
Ahab. Thank you. I was losing my mind. He has this Captain Ahab kind of like mentality towards the velociraptors. Like it's this respect, but also, he's gonna hunt it at the end, and it ultimately, spoilers, claims his life. I like that. And it's not like overt, he's not the main focus of the story, but it's there. And then you have just like even like little characters like Ned just serves as a plot device, a Nedry, to essentially cause what happens. But you understand he feels underappreciated, he feels underpaid, so he does corporate espionage. And also casting that actor was genius. I love that guy. He's in Seinfeld.
Yeah.
But you understand where everyone's coming from. You understand why they're doing what they're doing, and like this is something that so many modern movies just kind of ignore. And I know a lot of people like to say, oh well, movies don't need to worry about logic as long as the emotions and stuff are there. And I say, why not both? Logical consistencies while having emotional depth is possible. But so many people nowadays with so many movies like to be like, well, you kind of have to be like, oh, the plot holes don't matter or whatever. And like, not to say Jurassic Park is like ironclad, like you couldn't criticize some aspects of its plot, but for the most part, the sequence of events makes sense. It's like, oh, this dude was fed up with his work, he wanted more money, so he's going to steal from the company. Oh, a tropical storm comes along. Well, they only have one boat that goes between them and the mainland that he needs to hit. Like, the sequence of events that leads to the park having problems, to me, makes a lot of sense. Like, I
Yeah.
could see that happening.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like, I never feel like the movie just kind of happens to happen because like there's a lot of like working parts that you kind of see getting set up as you go into it. Not to mention, even as like a normal situation, like I mean, zoos. All right, from a logical perspective, zoos and different like habitat like shelters and stuff like that. They have situations where things happen too. They're not perfect. They're not ironclad. And in the case of Hammond's like dream kind of dinosaur park, it's kind of irrational when you consider you have a creature like a T-Rex in it and then the raptors. Like you look at this and you're like, this is a bad idea. And that kind of all comes together where all the factors that happen, even if you told me like, oh, this or this didn't happen, I still could have believed the events of this movie occurring like they do, because as a person, I'm like, yeah, this is not gonna go well, is it? So, if that makes sense.
No, for sure.
Yeah, it explores kind of what would happen if that were real.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many good conversations in this film about like the ethics and the morality of bringing back dinosaurs. And there's a lot of stuff like there's often quoted things, often meme things, but like even the line by Malcolm about like you got so caught up on whether or not you could do something, you didn't stop to think if you should. And like how during that dinner table scene, and when Grant is like, I don't know how you can possibly believe like that you have the slightest idea of how things are going to go. Like you're bringing back creatures that have been extinct for 65 million years. Like this idea that man is too prideful and thinks man like is in too control. It's a lack of humility. That's essentially, and they say it in the movies, like the lack of humility before nature here is astounding. And that's something that I respect it. Like I think it's the themes there are something that like, oh, huh, it really makes you think. And you can even like think about it in terms of like modern life and stuff, or in terms of just people throughout history and the insane stuff people have done that shows like a lack of respect towards nature. I mean, even hell, gene editing is an interesting thing that people are like trying to do now, and you compare it to like just this idea of like, do you think maybe science has gone too far in some areas? And like, when do you pump the brakes on that? I don't know. To me, it like as like an intellectual philosophical thing, it really speaks to me. And it's funny because this is a dinosaur movie, and it has like all of this depth to it. And this is something that I was watching Jurassic World and I was like, it just doesn't have any of this. Like it has a little bit of the corporate commentary of like, oh yeah, I get it. The dinosaurs are named after like corporations or whatever. Like, haha, corporations. But it's also like has more product placement than I've seen in like any movie. So it kind of rings a little bit hollow. But anyways, yeah, that's just what do you guys think about like kind of the themes in the narrative of this movie besides just, here's some dinosaurs to eat
Well,
people.
the thing I liked a lot was that it doesn't necessarily present like this, or like how we're talking about how it can only, or hold on, let me gather my thoughts here. It doesn't send one message like, oh, it could never work, like humans are too prideful, it's impossible. Like they had it working for a little while and it wasn't perfect, but I kind of like how it doesn't necessarily, like it kind of leans more towards Jurassic Park bad idea, but it doesn't
No, I
necessarily
see what you're
say
saying.
that it like couldn't work either.
Yeah, there's the, like we talked about earlier, there's this sense of like wonder that they're trying to give you about the dinosaurs and stuff. Like there is a reason, like Hammond wanted to make this for people, and it's not a bad idea in like theory, and possibly like it is. You can take like have the argument that, hey, an execution in Jurassic World kind of is about that. Like, oh well, what if they did do it and they did get it to work for a long time? In Jurassic World, it's kind of about the greed of like, okay, well now we have dinosaurs. What more can we get? You know, so they make a crazily ridiculous, scary dinosaur to drive up sales. There is some cool commentary in that movie. I just wish it was executed better. But the idea that dinosaurs do have merit in and of themselves, as like people they should be able to see this, and I think that's something the movie, it's kind of like a little bit meta because that's what the movie is meaning to do for us. This is the first time that dinosaurs were shown to people in a movie in a way that makes you believe that they are real. And I think that's why that money shot with the Brachiosaur, especially, I mean, imagine seeing this in 1991 or whenever the hell, 1992, when did this come out?
93.
Oh, thank you. Like, imagine seeing this then. The last time you saw dinosaurs on screen would have been like King Kong in like the 30s. Or I think they made King Kong in the 80s, but I can't remember if that had any dinosaurs in it. But regardless, they weren't going to look like this. And it's one of those like defining moments in all film. And that like wonder, you know, why can't, and it's something I talk with Sky a lot about this. Like my taste in movies is driven by like the search a little bit for wonder. And it's the reason I like Christopher Nolan, because like Interstellar or The Prestige and like his movies have this kind of sense of awe to them. And I want to see that in more movies. Well, I already mentioned this already. I think I'm repeating myself a little bit, but I agree that there is this sense in Jurassic Park that it's not just a negative. The park itself had merit, and it like there could have been a good like a situation where this worked, but it fell due to, you know, greed and a lack of humility towards what they created.
Yeah, no,
That's
no.
just my
I
take.
think it's pretty spot on. I mean, we also see that in a lot of regards to a lot of the characters that actually die throughout the film. Actually do also showcase a little bit of that like lack of respect. Weirdly enough, Nedry dies because he doesn't care. He doesn't care at all. He's a man who has only one interest, and it's getting back at the corporation for what's happening to him. Then we have Muldoon, who I'll be honest, while yes, he has like an Ahab thing, he's also kind of got that hunter mentality that he will prevail, you know, and it's kind of that pride in himself ends up letting him get tricked, you know. Yeah, it's one of the biggest reasons he ends up getting killed by a velociraptor is because he let his guard down. And you see that a lot like throughout the film, that a lot of the characters that we see kind of encapsulate that very thing of, hey, maybe you should have more respect for what you're messing with here. Which is funny because like the our main character Grant even warns like, or he talks about it a lot throughout it, that like his knowledge of paleontology teaches him a lot about these creatures even beforehand. And same with Malcolm, because you know, you mentioned the line earlier about how he's like questioning, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that. Maybe you should have thought about it a little bit more. And I think it's a very big theme, but I think Will is right that it doesn't like explicitly say, hey, this is bad, don't mess with nature. It's kind of like there is a lot of beauty in it too. And like that beauty is something that Hammond's dream, like for the first half of the film, you're like, yeah, it's kind of nice actually.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that kind of is there any major aspects of this film that we haven't talked about? I mean, we touched on the score, the story, the characters, the themes.
I was gonna say that we should talk about the score a little bit more because once again, John Williams.
Dude's a treasure, and he's only ever hit like gold. Like there's this period of time when John Williams would put out a score And it wasn't just like, oh, this is a movie score. It was a defining, iconic movie score with a specific sound that is 100% now forever in the public consciousness associated with a topic. So the Star Wars score is gonna forever be associated with, obviously, not just Star Wars, but the grander world of science fiction. The Indiana Jones score, in my opinion, will forever be associated with like adventure films. And the Jurassic Park score will forever be the defining dinosaur score, like of just wonder and awe and just like this, like the part of the score that hits me the most is the piano version of it. So there's parts in the movie where they do the dun, 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 and it's like in piano, and it's like it shows the versatility of a score that at 1 second is bombastic and loud and like epic or whatever words you
Grand.
want to use, but can at the same time be really personal and emotional and touching. It's just, it's really, I don't want to say it's my favorite Williams score because it's like, I mean, how do you pick? But it's definitely up there with Indiana Jones and Star Wars as being like, okay, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, I definitely would agree. I don't think this is my favorite Williams score, but I will say the main theme of Jurassic Park is one that is so synonymous with this film that, like, even just hearing it, somehow my entire body is like, oh, dude, I'm in wonder now. It's weird, but it's kind of perfect, It's one of those times where I'm like, I don't think anything could have been done better. And the score is definitely, once again, it's a knock out of the park. Knock out of the Jurassic Park.
Will, is this your first time like hearing this music? I mean, I imagine like you at least heard the music before, right?
I've definitely heard the main theme plenty of times before.
Like what do you think about it? Like its implementation specifically in the movie?
Um, it's kind of hard for me to say because I have to like try and separate it from the film in a way.
Mhm.
I don't really know how.
Yeah.
I don't really have all that worked out in my mind
Fair,
because
fair enough.
like the way I think about it is like the film score only has to serve the purpose of being in the film. So to talk about like the score by itself is a little weird for me just to try and like think about it.
Oh, fair enough.
that
Yeah,
that make any sense?
yeah, no, I get what you're saying. It's like it is one of those things. Um, but I mean, would you agree that like yeah, it's it's a good score
Oh yeah,
up
it's
up there with his
it's top notch for sure. Like John Williams could do no wrong.
anyways, so Sky, anything else any other aspects because you did recommend this.
Dude, I like dinosaurs.
I
Dinosaurs are sick.
I like
like
dinosaurs, dude. Like,
Oh, sorry, I just thought of something we should mention for the record. So, supposedly, well, historically speaking, dinosaurs nowadays they say that they would probably have had feathers. You know what I say to that? I say that's boring. Who wants
Yeah.
to see a dinosaur with feathers? And then also, velociraptors aren't actually that big. They made them a lot bigger for the movie. The velociraptors are like more like 4 feet tall. More like kind of like a wolf.
no,
Or a
dude, that's
coyote
still
or something.
terrifying.
But it's boring. All right, that's what I say. I say make them
Make 'em
bigger.
bigger.
Yeah, I don't mind at all.
Yeah, I don't mind either way. I honestly, I think I just like the concept of the Velociraptor in general.
Yeah.
I think the only thing I'd want to say is the first time I saw this film, I was like, I think I was like 6 or 7. I was pretty young, and like, it really says something when like, at the time I was like, yo, this movie is good. Even as like a kid, I was like, this is great. And my parents would always be like, yeah, it's great. And then they told me that I used to watch Jurassic Park 3 a lot more. And I was like, why? They're like, we don't know. And that's just a little anecdote. I just wanted to say that, like, for some odd reason, this is my favorite film by far of all of them, and yet I guess as a kid I watched three
Oh
more.
well, it's the best one.
Oh, by far.
Well, that's because 3 has the Spinosaurus fights, which
Oh
as a kid they're the most
yeah.
like, oh look at that.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. That's probably why I liked it so much as a kid. I mean, like, I like the Spinosaur. It's just cool. It's cool. It's not cool as the Brachiosaur though. Sorry, I like Brachiosaurs. They're cool. They got long necks. They're like they eat leaves. That makes me think of the Bluth movie, Land Before Time. Okay, I think we better
Oh,
stop
yeah.
before I start going down.
Yeah, I think we should get back on track. So let's wrap it up then. Sky, or actually you just talked a bunch. You know what? I'll start with my final thoughts. Jurassic Park, is it the best dinosaur movie ever made? Yes.
Yes.
Is it a movie that if you haven't seen, you're missing out? Yes. Is it
Yes.
pretty much almost completely a perfect movie? Yeah, pretty much, almost completely. I would recommend it. I would recommend watching it twice, maybe 3 times. And yeah, I mean, I pretty much have nothing bad to say about this movie. Other than, yeah, there's a little bit, some of the CGI aged a little bit. That's pretty much the only negative I can say.
Yeah, I think that's pretty easy to forgive, all things considered.
Oh yeah. What are your guys' thoughts? Final thoughts.
I'm really glad that Sky you suggested this because I'd never seen it before. I was like, oh, it's time to get a little more cultured.
Mm-hmm.
It's time to repent one of my film sins, which I have a few of. So it was nice to get this off the list, and it was really nice to go into this movie that everyone says is great, and to go in fresh with like no nostalgia or anything, and still really enjoy it. And I think that's a testament to how good it actually is.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's
for
like
sure.
really spot on. It's almost like poetic because last time we did a video, we did it on Batman, and it was the same kind of emotion for me. I was like, I'd heard about this Batman film, but seeing it, I was like, wow, this is a really good film actually. And it's kind of like I
Yeah.
actually 100% get what you mean by that. Uh, Almost like reverse situation, weird. Um, I guess my final thoughts are, yeah, I love this film. It's great. It's fantastic. It's incredibly well made. I don't like calling any movie a perfect movie, but Jurassic Park kind of hits like every note for me that I could consider like a good time. I can watch this any day, much like my favorite Indiana Jones film. I could sit back any day and watch this again. I recommend it 100%.
Oh yeah. Well, that's good to say then. Thanks to anyone who listened on this a little bit shorter. I kind of like this length. Like what we've been going for 45 minutes. I like to be a little under an hour. Makes it, especially when I'm editing. My goodness. But yeah. Thanks for joining us on the podcast. If you did, please, like and subscribe. Hit that bell button. Well, why not? Or don't. Who
Yeah,
knows?
go check out the Director's
Anyways,
Chair podcast.
yeah, specifically the one where me and Sky
Stop.
interviewed what's
Stop.
his face? Tarantino. We definitely
Stop.
interviewed him. Um anyways, yeah, we'll catch you next time. Commuters roll
What is
out.
this? Fucking. Are we Transformers now?